Hi, my name's Keith Cooper of Northlight Images, and in this video I'm going to have a quick first look at a new lens I've been asked to have a look at. It's from a company called Brightin Star, Chinese lens manufacturer, contacted me and said, we've got some interesting new lenses, would you like to have a look at them? As if I'm going to say no. Anyway, it is unusual in that it is a 9mm rectilinear lens. So it's 9mm, not a fisheye or anything like that. It's full frame. This is the RF mount version. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm shooting this on an EOS RP RF mount. I'm using a 24mm Olympus lens for this, and I'm going to put this 9mm lens, without moving the camera, I'm going to put the 9mm lens on the camera so you can see the difference between 24mm, which I always used to think was wide-ish angle, with this, which is ridiculously wide. But anyway, I've got lots more examples and other things. I will have a proper written review of this in due course, where I will look at details of performance of the lens, how it handles in the corners and things. Suffice to say, I'm not disappointed at the moment. It's not often I put a lens on a camera and go out with it and go, wow, that's different. Anyway, now let's just put the lens on this camera here and you can see what I mean. There we go, that's the 9mm. As you can see, a somewhat wider view. Phenomenally wide. 9mm rectilinear. There's fairly minimal distortion of straight lines on it. There's a little bit of barrel distortion in it, but not obvious and easily correctable. Same way with vignetting. But anyway, that's enough of super wide-o vision. I'm just going to put the other lens back on so I can take the lens off and actually sort of have a look at some details with it. But as you can see, depth of field, we're shooting this at f11, f16. It's pretty good. You want distortions? I can give you distortions. Anyway, enough of that. Well, there we go, back to normal. Normal-ish, 24mm. So that's an Olympus 24mm f2.8. It's a lens that my dad used to use quite a lot. It's just a nice wide-ish lens. Anyway, Brightin Star. No, I'd never heard of them either. The lens, 450 grams. So about it's metal, it's solidly built. Nice focus throw on it, not huge. There is some movement at the infinity end. You can, I believe, on this focus slightly past infinity, and I'll come back to why you might want that. Normally it's something on tilt shift lenses that I see, but there are solid reasons why you might want to do that. Manual aperture. It's fully manual, there's no electronics on this. You've got so much depth of field that if you need autofocus for a lens this wide, then you need serious help with your technique, or you're photographing things moving a lot. But even then it ain't going to show much difference because the depth of field at 9mm is phenomenal. This is an f5.6 lens. Now, I did look at the Lauer 10mm 2.8 lens a while ago, which was an excellent lens, and 2.8 as well, so you could use that in quite lowish light. It's quite nice to use. 5.6, is that a problem? No, it means even wide open you're not going to see much softening of this. In fact, the only difference you're really going to notice with this is that at 5.6 you won't get star spikes. I'll show some examples in a bit, and you'll see what I mean. But at 5.6 you're not going to get much softness. If you want out of focus, backgrounds, forget it. You can just about show it with this because it will focus down to about 20 centimeters. So it'll focus quite close. But you've got depth of field scale on here, which basically reminds you that you've got a lot of it. So manual steps. There is an interesting f-stop. There's 5.6, then there's one marked with a dot, and then there's 8. Now, if you do it 5.6, the star spikes on it, because there's a 5-blade aperture, it gives 10 spikes on Sunstars. you will get 5.6, you won't get that because you've effectively got a circular aperture. If you want as wide as you can go, but still want the star spikes, you can just take it up to that unknown value. I assume it must be 6.7, who knows, doesn't really matter that much, but makes a difference between the actual look and feel of things. So it's quite a bulbous front end. There is a fixed metal lens hood on it. You can't put filters on this. Filters, though, you can put on the lens. You put them on the back, but I'll mention that in a moment. I've got some filters here to have a look at. Not that I've tested as yet. So, goes up to f22. A quick test of some pictures of some buildings showed that, as you'd expect, the image softens a bit at 16 and 22. Not much, but you can see a slight softening. I will do some more detailed pictures on a tripod and look at detail. But what you can see in the pictures from this is that, well, it's wide. It's a coated lens. Didn't notice any obvious flare or anything like that, but you're going to be getting sun problems here. It's such a wide angle. Let's say metal lens hood, which is nice. That is a nice smooth fit. Doesn't come off easily. That's good. That's the back. This is available in different mounts as well, other mirrorless mounts, so Sony, Nikon and L, I believe, for this. This currently is about 450 quid UK price, I believe. I've seen it advertised. I put some notes to it. Note this, they are not affiliate links or anything like that. I have a strict policy. I don't do affiliate links on if somebody just sends me something. I may do with a company that I've worked with for quite a while, but I don't do just for this. This is purely, thank you very much for sending me the lens to look at. Now, I know some people get a bit sniffy about, oh, yet another Chinese lens. Well, I suppose in some ways I might as well. And I think, oh, yet another 50mm lens. How many do I need? No, I don't. But when I see something that is different, then that makes a bit of a difference. Anyway, that's the lens. Yeah, nice-ish box. Not much notes on it in multiple languages, not many notes on the lens. You'll have to have a look. I'll see if I can find some more technical data for when I do the proper, the written review of it. But this one came with filters, rear filters. Now there's an ND1000 neutral density. Great for if you want to smooth things. Now, 5.6 with an ND1000. You're going to, even in daylight, you're going to get longish exposures. There's an ND64, and there is a night filter. Now, this one I don't actually offhand know what this is. It's a sort of light bluish lilac colour. Presumably it does something for street lights or something. I'll have a look at it because I'm going to take this out at night and see what I can do in terms of getting some interesting looking shots. Now, what do the pictures look like? Well, as I said, they're good quality. I can see a bit of softening in the corners. There's virtually no chromatic aberration. Now, in the way you design lenses, there are always trade-offs between different things. So if there's no chromatic aberration, you could expect there's indications in fine detail that there's going to be a bit of coma. So whilst I haven't tested it on stars or anything like that, my suspicion is that you might find there's going to be a bit of, as an astro lens. Anyway, 5.6, probably not what you'd really want for that if you want ultra wide. But anyway, I've just loaded some pictures. I'll cut them into the video here so you can actually see what's what. I'm just going to go through some of these pictures here that I've got some samples. Now, wide. You can use it. I'm an architectural photographer and I would normally use a shift lens if I'm taking pictures of buildings to stop them doing this effect, which is what you get the moment you point a camera upwards, you get converging verticals. Now, if you've got wide enough lens, what you can do is take a shot with the camera level and then crop it. And if you crop it, this is the equivalent of a picture taken with a shift lens, where I've shifted the lens upwards to keep the vertical straight. Now, this is a lot cheaper than any shift lens. And as long as you keep the camera perfectly level, you won't get any converging verticals. And you may find that it's good enough for cropping things. Now, this was taken using the RP, which is a 26 megapixel sensor. My normal architectural work, I use Fuji GFX 100S, which is 100 megapixels, and I use lenses like the 30mm tilt shift from Fuji. Now that, I think you could buy 10 of these for what the price you'd pay for one of those. So, you know, this is potentially a lot more useful to people. It's nice, nice-ish lens. But anyway, as I say, I just went out just to take some shots. And this is just, if you've seen any of my other lens reviews or you've seen my tilt shift book, the locations here will be familiar. This is Montfort University, which is not far away from where I live here in Leicester in the UK. And I regularly shoot pictures of these buildings. Now, having somewhere I know well is good because it means I've got a comparison between things. It also means that something has to be quite special for me to spot new angles and things like that. And this was wide enough that it did. Now this view here over a view over the river towards the university, you can see I've got both banks. I've got the bridge that I'm walking across. I've got detail. You can see how that wide angle look, and there's no obvious distortion in it. If you want, I mean, it says in the specs 123 degree field of view. Now, it doesn't say whether that's diagonal or whatever, but it's impressive. If you want wider than this, you're probably going to go towards a fisheye. And then that comes with its image projection geometry. I won't call it distortion because fisheyes don't distort lenses. They just have a different image projection geometry. So if I go down to there, great, you know, I've got a lovely wide shot. I've kept the camera level so that, you know, don't get convergence. That is wide. The problem is you can see shadow slap bang in the middle of it. I've took quite a few pictures of this where I'm just playing around with it, where I've looked at the pictures afterwards and found my feet in the pictures. Now, it's a problem if you use fisheye lenses. You're used to that. I'm not used to it with a lens like this, so it's something to take notice of. But anyway, you know, nice enough view. Remember, you can crop these. So you could crop that out if you wanted a wide angle. Who needs panoramic stitching when you can just take a narrow crop? Certainly, if you use this on something like, you know, one of the higher megapixel cameras like an R5 or something like that, 45 megapixels, then you're going to get pretty good images. Now, if I go closer and look up, I get the classic convergence. Now, you might decide that you want this look. There's nothing wrong with this look. And in fact, many a time, I will take occasional pictures, even when I'm doing architectural photography, I will take a few like this because the architects generally hate images of their buildings like this, but the marketing department and the web people, whoever do whatever, actually quite like images like this, a bit more dynamic, a bit more, well, whatever it is they're trying to sell, they quite like. So I always do a mix and match. Most of my images from architectural clients are dead straight, and I take care to make sure those, yeah, they're properly straight. But every so often I chuck in a few like this. As I say, the architects hate them, but you know, they're not necessarily the people paying me. Close up, yeah, camera level again. And here you can see how a lens like this, if you are aware of lines and structures in your image, you can certainly give a feel of movement to it. Now, picture, yeah, a view I've taken, you know, probably hundreds of times in testing lenses and things like that, but never quite like this. Never quite with that strong lines, very strong lines showing the building and with proper verticals on it. Going inside, there's a corridor just full of upside down umbrellas. Yeah, it works. It's quite an interesting picture. It shows, if you just were to use a not so wide view, the presence of the umbrellas upside down and their colours would not be so obvious. Now, I'm sure there are other views of this I could make, interesting views, but you see, I've offset the line of where, you know, the convergent point, offset from the centre a bit. I find with ultra wide lenses like this, if you do stuff right to the middle, it better be something that works with everything heading towards the middle. Slightly offset gives a bit of unbalance and makes the picture just that little bit more interesting. I've got, as I say, half a dozen. I only went out yesterday afternoon for a quick walk around with this lens. Yeah, I took about 150 pictures or so, something like that. So don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of them by any means. But as an interior picture, you can see close up that computer screen is quite sharp. The switch and socket down that's really close to me is a little bit soft. First of all, this is focused to infinity, so at f8, so we're going to get a bit of softness from that anyway, but detail elsewhere in the picture, absolutely fine. Next picture, looking in, now this building, it naturally, with all the staircases running all over the place, it naturally gives you interesting angles. But I've took lots of pictures. I've never got one quite like this because it just works on it. Now, these are all handheld, so if they're slightly on the skew, that's because they're all handheld. But most people don't ever notice that. You'll notice the Sunstar spikes on it. There are 10. This is an f8, as I said, and it's quite prominent on a specular highlight like that as a reflection of the sun from the building across the way. But all of the detail here, it gives you a nice sense of flow and complexity. Now, you might want to simplify this. This is one of those images that as a small image is just massively crowded and too busy. But as a larger image, it can work. Remember, the scale of what people are looking at images affects your composition. One reason I dislike phones for photography, actually the main reason I dislike phones for photography is because of my eyesight. I need these glasses to be able to see this here. I can see the screen quite well on the camera itself, no real problems there. But this, now if I take my glasses off, it's quite blurred. That means any hope of me using a phone. And also, phone pictures, great phone pictures, work at the size of a phone screen. Don't expect them to work if you want to make pictures that big. It just doesn't work. People don't appreciate the differences in composition and how we see pictures, particularly at distance and size of pictures makes a difference. Anyway, another view. Looking up that stairs there, you can see if you're going to have people in the pictures, there's going to be potentially a bit of distortion, unless they're in the middle and at a reasonable distance. Yeah, it gives a feel for the structure, it gives a feel for the space. In fact, having stood at this spot before, this is one several times I've thought of taking a picture, but haven't because it just didn't quite work. This one, with the strong lines, gives you much stronger feel for what's going on with it. Anyway, that's that. Look round the other way. Yeah, it's busy. I took loads of these pictures just to see how it felt. Some spaces work with it, some spaces don't work so well. If you're close up to something, remember that anything very close to the lens will be massively exaggerated, as in this number here. Looking across this way here, lots of detail. There is no problem in lack of detail. If I look at the pictures, there are some written things in the wall at the top left hand corner there, and you can clearly read what's written on the posters in the wall. Now that's good enough. That tells me I'm not going to have problems with this lens. Now it's a little bit soft at the tip of the 5 because it's close. Remember I said I'm shooting these f8 focus to infinity, and it's not worth trying to do hyperfocal focusing on a lens like this. The movement between it is minimal. I mentioned about the focus scale here going beyond infinity. If you shove filters on the back of a lens, it affects the position of where the lens focuses. That's why you need the flexibility for it. As I haven't experimented with this. I will look at it in more detail when I do the sort of proper testing of it and see the differences between adding the filters and not adding the filters. But that's what I suspect that is. It's not, as I say, you get it on tilt shift lenses, but that's for other reasons. But
putting these little filters on the back. Now, I've used rear filters. Canon have an adapter, an EF to RF adapter that takes filters, and that allows for the distance by changing the distance that the lens is away from the camera. This, you can't do it. You put the filters on the back, it's going to change your focus. But anyway, there's looking down, another wide view. I've got bright lights here in this, and even with the sun, apart from the Sunstars, there's no obvious flare or anything like that. I haven't tested it precisely, but we shall see. View like this, looking downwards, and this is one of those, this is where I took one of the previous photos from. You can see here one of the levels. Looking down here, I was acutely aware that when you're using a lens like this, even slight movements of the camera, tilting it, shifting it, any movements of the camera can massively change the perspective, the geometry of the picture, particularly where lines meet the frame. And quite often I find that if you're doing wide stuff like this, a few slight shots of slightly different angles, moving, even just moving your camera 6 inches, a foot or so, will considerably change the view if you've got anything close in it. And compositions that work, I just look at, say, a load of pictures I've taken. So I took 6 pictures from this position. They're all going to be subtly different, and I will look at them and I will very quickly go, that's the one that I like the best. Now, that's because I've years of shooting wide lenses, having a particular preference for certain styles of geometry and composition. You need to refine things like that. If you're going to use a lens like this, every time you're slightly uncertain of the composition, take more photos. You will find quite quickly that the subtle differences, just by moving yourself, the camera, forwards, backwards, just a little bit, make a huge difference with a lens like this. Much more than you would with a standard lens, 35, 50 mil, something like that. A lot of learning to use and get good results from a lens like this is about understanding those subtleties. Remember too that if you've never used something like this, it's going to feel very different. Resist the temptation to think that everything now needs ultra wide angle. It's the new hammer effect. To the person with a new hammer, every problem seems like a nail. And I've seen it with fisheye lenses. People get a fisheye lens, they go, wow, that's incredible. Use it lots, and then think, well, tired of that. That's why ultra wide lenses, fisheyes and things like that can often be picked up second-hand because people have bought them. They've got over the wow factor, and I'll be blunt, their tastes or imagination did not match what you could do with something like this, and therefore the lens is sat unused. If that's not your style of picture, then yes, you might be interested in using it for a bit, but you need a bit more to it to use stuff like this. I still use a fisheye regularly in my architectural photography. Not often, but just enough with certain corrections in software and things, not a full rectilinear correction, but certain types of corrections. I use it quite often. But I get this as well. A new lens like this, my interest in it will go way up and then drop off. Now, if the lens after a while, I find I'm not using it, it goes into the why have you still got this lens collection. However, if it's wide enough, interesting enough, and I get a few good enough results, particularly if I get a few results that a client goes, oh, that's nice, I've not thought of that angle, then it gets as a keeper. But, thanks again to Brightin Star for saying, please test this lens. It's partly the reason why I do all the videos and testing.
it gives me an excuse to go out and actually take photos. And sometimes I do need that excuse. Certainly, a lot of hassles we've had in the last year or so, family-related issues for myself and for Karen. And my enthusiasm for photography has waned quite a bit in certain times. And something like this just goes, whee, out you go, take some pictures, enjoy yourself. Yes, if you're getting the hint that I'm quite enthusiastic about this lens, yes, I am. It is good. But anyway, let's have a look at a few more pictures. Stairs. As an architectural photographer, whenever I know that I'm being asked to take pictures of stairs and stairwells as part of a project, I always go, right, okay, it's tricky to do. Stairs are tricky to photograph in an interesting way. And remember, the pictures that I take, if they're for a client, they have a job to do. So here, yes, I've got a nice field of view of it. Somebody walking down the stairs, that's great. It has a nice feel of the openness of the stairwell. If you don't use a wide lens for this, then sometimes it can feel very closed in. Now, some stairwells are very closed in, but if you want to show space, openness, light, you need a wide angle like this. And there are no obvious distortions on this. As I said, there is a little bit of barrel distortion, but it ain't much. Here's a much smaller staircase. This is an emergency staircase in another part of the building. And once again, I've been able to show aspects of it that look a bit different. Would I use this? I would probably already, I'd be inclined to take this lens on a job with me if I knew I was going to be photographing things like this, just because it gave me an alternative. Now, the nearest alternative I've got on my GFX is actually the 15mm Lauer tilt shift lens, which you can use on a medium format sensor, which you can of course use to get corrections and stuff. That's ultra wide. I've got reviews of most of these lenses and things, so it's always worth, if you're interested in them, have a look at the notes in the video and see what it goes at. Another view, this is typical of the shots I get asked to take, oh, we've put some new lifts in, could you go and photograph the lifts? Well, yeah, it gives a sense of space, it says where it is, all the usual bits and pieces like that. So that works. Once again, a lens that's useful. This is back in that empty space there looking across. I mentioned about converging lines, convergence points where you have in it. Decide if you've got interesting stuff at the side, whether you want it in or not. You can see the numbers here. I've got versions without the numbers. So once again, just by moving a little bit, different versions of these, and they all look subtly different. Here we are on level 5, as I can see again. With the person in the middle here, there's no obvious distortions. That's okay. If you're going to have people in it, do not have them at the edge of the field, because they will look, well, you saw the bit when I had the other lens on, I had this lens on the camera there, the difference it makes. This is not a portrait lens. Not of anyone whose opinion you value, I'm going to say. You could take some truly awful pictures of people with this, but I doubt they'd appreciate it. But note again, the lines and things, lots of things, they draw you into the person there. Now, in a paying job, I might well have rearranged those chairs a little bit more. But this is just me walking around the building, just taking a few snapshots. Oh, there we go, stairs again. This is one of the bits, and this is purely a technical thing from some of the work that I do. I know that it is difficult to get interesting shots of stairwells. And that is interesting enough to be okay for a client. Straight on views, don't get the dynamism. The numbers I mentioned earlier are off to the side. You're gonna get stretching at the top and bottom. It's very wide. There we go. Let's have a look up the whole area there. It looks a bit better. Or you could go wide. Notice here the Sunstars. Now, I've got some pictures I took of this at different settings. And this is where I discovered that there is very little difference between the 5.6 and the mystery bonus aperture that you get between 5.6 and 8 with a dot on it. Other than that gives you a bit of Sunstars, and 5.6 doesn't. Very little difference between them. It's obviously with a 5-blade aperture, it's a pentagon, so it's going to be quite pronounced, and it is. You take this to f8, f11, and the Sunstars are very pronounced on it. Now, if you don't want the Sunstars, shoot at 5.6, and that will get rid of them. View looking down, another one here. Now, outside, once again, that check pattern of the paving slabs, curves, lines, all works together. Would somebody want this picture? I don't know, but it was enough that it got me interested. Likewise with this one. I'll just finish off here on this. You can see the wide angle effect on these leaves laying on the ground. It really is quite obvious here as how round shapes will distort towards the corners. And there is detail. This shows a bit of the vignetting you get. This is, once again, this is at f8, I think. This is certainly won't be 5.6. It was 8 or 11. But the vignetting does drop off a bit. But remember, natural optical design will show you will get vignetting on an ultra-wide angle lens, no matter how good the lens is. You will always get some vignetting because of basic optics and how it works. The distortions, I'll just finish off on one quick bit here. And this is based on testing of many wide angle lenses. The distortions typically, as I say, coma, bit of astigmatism towards the corners. You can cure that to some extent by using a tool like Sharpen AI, which has a movement camera shake correction. Because the distortions you're getting towards the corners are typically, if there's something like coma, they're not the same tangentially and sagittally to the image. This is, if you have a look at MTF chart, the kinds of distortion that you get at the corners is similar to camera blur, or camera motion shake. And I've written about this elsewhere in lens reviews and things. So there are tools that can give you improve the detail around the edges here, particularly some of the smart tools. But anyway, I have rambled on about this lens long enough. Suffice to say, I'm looking forward to taking it out and trying a few more things with it. I'll see what the filters do. I don't use filters very often. I do use them sometimes to blur people. I want movement. Where I've got people in shots, sometimes like this, I don't want them to be so obviously recognisable, so I really want a longer exposure so there's a bit of blur. I'm not that interested in blurring the sky, although it works sometimes. It can be, it's one of those effects that can easily look overdone. But anyway, if you've got any questions about the lens, I'll put some links in the notes to other articles and related stuff that I've done. Feel free to ask questions. It's going to be, I'm doing the testing of the Canon Pro 1100 still. So I've got quite a bit of printer testing to do. And so it just depends when I nip out and try some things with this. But this is by means of an introduction to wide lens. I suppose many people would say it's a review of a wide lens, but I like to do a written one as well. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.